What's going on, guys? Anthony from Chronometer Check here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the rose gold Parnis Yachtmaster. This is a pretty blatant homage of the Rolex Yachtmaster II. It does a pretty good job of copying the style, but is it worth the money? I paid about $140 for this out of pocket. You can get it a little bit cheaper on the gray market, such as on eBay and other marketplaces. Of course, you do need to be a little bit more cautious when buying from them, but you can be had for about under $100. So this all actually offers pretty decent specs for the price. We're going to get into that. Is it really worth it? Let's find out. So upon first glance, I was actually rather impressed when pulling the Parnis Yachtmaster right out of the box. You can see it actually looks pretty nice. And especially with the 18 karat rose gold plating, you never really know what you're going to get in terms of the quality or how decent it's going to look. A lot of times a gold plated watch could kind of come off as cheap, like some fashion brands like Michael Kors, and they just never really tend to look good. So especially when ordering online, and there wasn't too many reviews of this watch, so it was kind of hard to tell exactly what I was going to be getting, and I felt like I was kind of rolling the dice there, but I was actually pleasantly surprised once I took it out of the box. So I did come up on this bracelet right here. This was my own strap that I put on that I'll talk about later. So this bracelet, as soon as I got the watch, I was pretty excited. So I went to size the bracelet, and immediately there were some issues. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not actually a terrible bracelet. It looks great, I think. It looks pretty. You got brushed end links and polished center links, and it looks pretty good for what it is. It's 20 millimeters across and tapers down to 16, so a pretty handsome design. And I think, considering what it is and how affordable, this is a little bit of a step up compared to what you usually see in some bracelets, except for, let's see if we could get this camera to focus. So there are actually a bunch of screws on instead of just regular push pins. And this is where I ran into my first terrible problem. So the bracelet was on the watch. I tried to unscrew the pins and they started stripping. So now, don't get me wrong, I'm not using the best quality Bergeon screwdrivers to unscrew this, but it was just your everyday screwdriver. But still, I feel like something is wrong with these screws. And it actually took a couple of tries, and I had to remove a couple of different links and use some other screws from other links in order to kind of like mesh them together, and just, it was a big mess. Basically, be very careful when sizing this bracelet. And then when I eventually went on to remove it to put on my own strap, that was where I ran into the next problem right away. So really not off to the best of starts. For some reason, it was a really big struggle to remove the strap. Putting it on, not so much, but I think the issue is that they're slightly misaligned. This is my best guess. They're ever so slightly misaligned so that the spring bar inside of the watch, it's kind of a little bit bent no matter what, so you can't put it in straight. And that's kind of difficult. But for what it is, like I said, it looks good. It's decent. It's I would say slightly better than most bracelets in this price bracket for the watch. It is solid, pretty solid feeling. No folded end links. You do have solid end links also, which is, again, when I saw this, I was actually pretty pumped. But I was overall a little bit disappointed. Now, the clasp is something that, in theory, it feels like it'd be good, and it looks pretty good. It's stamped with the Parnis logo, and it actually is decorated pretty well. It feels okay. It snaps into place tightly, but it's just not comfortable. There's this little bump over here. I don't know if you could see that, but when wearing it on your wrist, it just kind of digs into your skin, and it's not the most comfortable feeling. So I was really excited to finally just take this strap off and put it onto my own strap. But a little bit more about that later. So the watch itself is actually rather good looking. You can see this 18 karat gold plating is pretty much what sticks out of you right off the bat, along with the ceramic bezel. But it actually is executed rather well. And I love the way the case is polished all over, except for the case back, but it really is a true homage to the Rolex Yachtmaster II. You do have the black ceramic bezel, which is, again, executed very well and very surprisingly well for what it is. You have these embossed markers, which actually look really nice. I think the bezel is what makes this feel like a premium piece, even more so than anything. And especially because you really don't see too many of these ceramic matte bezels that are embossed. As far as the dial of the watch itself, I don't know how well the camera is going to be able to pick this up, but it might look a little bit like a glossy black on the camera, but it's actually sort of a sunburst, very, very dark, charcoal gray, almost dark, rich, chocolatey brown, or maybe even just a light black. And it actually looks really, really great when reflected in the light. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the charcoal bezel of the SKX. I love the dark gray bezel on my Steinhardt Ocean 39, but this is just something a little bit different and honestly really awesome. You really don't see, I mean, I know a lot of times in blue watches, they have nice sunburst effects, but really for black, the options are kind of limited for these more affordable pieces until you start throwing some more money at it. You know, even Steinhardt is not really an entry-level affordable piece, I would say. I mean, it is entry-level in the grand scheme of watches, but compared to cheaper Chinese watches like this, you're paying a couple $100 extra more. And even in watches like that, you're not really getting anything too fancy with the finish. So this actually just looks really good. It's probably made out of, you know, some plastic, but it just looks really good. You do have rose gold embossings for the hour markers as well, which is another nice touch. Now, the Parnis logo is written in white. I would have preferred if that was also written in rose gold, but at the same time, it does create some nice balance with the text at the bottom reading automatic, water resistant, 21 joules. So it just creates a little bit nice balance, and some people might like that. Now, speaking of water resistance, so I've heard lots of different things about the water resistance of this watch. I've actually contacted Parnis themselves about the water resistance, and they are pretty much refusing to give any sort of depth rating because they don't want you to swim in it. But I have heard of people swimming in their Parnis watches, their Submariner homages, and whether or not you want to do that is up to you. Again, look it up. There are plenty of people who have reported with no issues swimming with it. I personally will not, just because I don't want to take the risk, especially considering they're not willing to back up their water resistance. It just says water resistant with no actual depth rating. And that's kind of what you expect with a Chinese manufactured watch like this. Yes, it's a good looking watch. It's relatively decent quality compared to what you pay for. Sapphire crystal, the Miyota movement is actually pretty decent. Overall, the build quality is not bad at all, but they are going to cut corners in some places, and one of those is in quality control and assurance. So when it comes to water resistance rating and things like that, they're not really going to be too fussy about that. They're just going to send it out, and, you know, kind of whatever happens, happens. Speaking of quality control issues, so I've actually had a couple. There have been some horror stories with Parnis watches on the internet, and there have also been some people who have bought many Parnis watches with no issue. Now, this is my first ever Parnis watch, and I already have two relatively big quality control issues. So one, right off the bat, this is the one that kind of bugged me as soon as I got it. I just took it out of the box and I just knew right away, so I don't know how well the camera is going to be able to pick this up, but the bezel is just, the insert is ever so slightly misaligned. Now, I could probably fix this. I could pry off the bezel, pry off the insert, so that's why I'm not too worried at the end of the day. And also, it's a unidirectional bezel because it is based off the Parnis Yachtmaster, or excuse me, the Rolex Yachtmaster, so it's not the end of the world. It's kind of pretty easy to center between those two clicks. It's actually pretty easy to kind of wiggle around and center between those two clicks. But should you have to do that, I mean, I paid full retail price for this watch. I bought it off the Parnis website, and it came out to about $140. So when you're paying $140 for a watch, you know, you could get a Seiko that, okay, admittedly, a lot of times they do have, you know, chapter ring alignment issues and date wheel alignment issues and things like that. But for the most part, at least you're getting their brand backing. So the second quality control issue is actually to do with the movement itself, or at least the inner workings of the case. So I don't know if you could hear this. I'm going to hold it up to the mic, but there's a little bit of a rattling sound, and you could hear it whenever the watch has no power, and then you either wind the crown or just give it a shake and give it some power, or really just anytime you move it enough. So when it's on the wrist, you definitely hear it. You even feel it a little bit. It's kind of like this rattly, noisy sound, and at first I was very, very worried. It almost sounds like a grinding of some sort, which is, you know, if you know about mechanical watches, it's probably not a good sign. I've looked it up, and, you know, looked up some other people's experiences with different Parnis watches, different Parnis models, because not many people have this one in particular. And it seems to be a common occurrence. And people, you know, have gone years and years and their Parnis has still been working even after having the same issues. So at the end of the day, I'm not too worried. My speculation is that it's the automatic rotor is actually scratching against the case back here. So I believe it could, if I open up the case back, I could probably tighten the rotor and then, you know, fix that problem once and for all. So again, I'm not too worried. I am a little bit crafty. I like tinkering with my watches. And at the end of the day, it's a relatively affordable watch, so it's not the end of the world if I break something. I could probably even slap in, you know, a replacement Miyota movement, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. Because of the case back design, it's not your typical, you know, like diver case back. It is more of a Rolex style, so it doesn't need a special tool, which I don't have on hand. So I've kind of been waiting for that, and also I've just been enjoying it and wearing it without that. I just almost don't let it bother me, because at the end of the day, it is a mechanical piece. It has pieces and parts moving on the inside. And of course, there are going to be once in a while a little sound you might hear. And it's actually a cool little reminder for me that this is a mechanical piece. The movement itself is a Miyota A215 movement, which is actually not bad considering what you're paying for this piece. The specifications say that it should run between -20 and +40 seconds a day, but I and many other Parnis owners have experienced much, much better accuracy. Mine runs about 3 seconds slow per day, which is amazing. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say? It does have hand winding. Let's see, screw this crown out a little bit. Excuse my terribly goofy gloves. I definitely need to upgrade soon. But it does have hand winding. The crown does feel a little bit gritty. It's not the best feeling crown when you're winding it up, I'm gonna be honest. But it doesn't feel awful either. I've definitely felt worse. Now, pulling out the crown, the actuation is really, really good. So if you move the crown a little bit when setting the time, it actually really kind of makes that thing go. And same thing with the date wheel. You click it out once for the date wheel. It actually feels really good. It's very satisfying. You do hear a little bit of a click. It's relatively snappy and quick. And I like it a lot. Honestly, these Miyota movements are cheap, affordable, and they just get the job done, to be honest. Now, as far as case size and dimensions, the watch wears at about 41.5 in diameter and about 12.5 millimeters thick. Now, this is about the same size as a Seiko SKX on paper. Not quite, but half a millimeter off in both diameter as well as height. But for some reason, the SKX does tend to wear a lot chunkier. I think because of the bezel on the Yachtmaster Homage is actually sloped, and that kind of gives it a more sleeker appearance. It lets you fit it under a cuff easier, whereas the little extra bulk of the coin edge bezel on the SKX, it just makes it a little more prominent. But I actually like the sleekness of the Yachtmaster, so that's actually really, really nice. The lug width is about 47 millimeters, but I will say that it actually wears, I would say, a little bit smaller than that, because you can see how the edges of the lugs do curve around. It actually hugs your wrist relatively nicely. Now, the case back does stick out just about as much as the end of the lugs, so my wrist rests on the case back, and more so than the lugs, and I'll show you that in a bit. So 20 millimeter lug width, that's pretty standard size. I'm glad they didn't do some random size like the 21 millimeter Orient Bambino or the 19 millimeter Seiko 5. But 20 millimeters, great standard size, you know, same as a lot of Rolex, Submariners, etc. And luckily I had this strap on hand. This is a Hirsch Havea rubber strap that I was able to quickly swap out my Parnis bracelet for, because as I said earlier, I wasn't the happiest with this bracelet. It did have some issues. Looks nice, not the most comfortable. So I slapped it on this rubber strap to give it that real, you can see that really kind of gives it the full effect of the Rolex Rose Gold Yachtmaster II Homage look. And I don't have the $20,000 to spend on a Yachtmaster, if I'm being completely honest. This strap is pretty good. I'm going to go into more in detail in this strap in another video, but honestly, rubber straps, good rubber straps aren't that expensive. You get a Benetto Cinturini, hope I pronounced that right, for about 30 bucks. And they're, I would say, on par with this rubber strap, which I paid a lot more. I'm almost embarrassed to say how much I paid for the rubber strap. It was almost as much as the watch itself, but overall it gives a really, really good wearing experience. It makes it comfortable. I did also throw on this cheap little $4 deploying class from eBay. Now again, this is rose gold plated and it just matches pretty much perfectly. So what that probably means is they also use the same cheap rose gold plating in the case, which is fine. You know, I get it. You get what you pay for. But it just makes the watch feel so much more like fun to wear. It feels so much more luxury with this cheap little deploying class. So it doesn't matter if you have it on a leather band, you have it on a rubber strap, you could do it. And this just gets the job done. It's adjustable, obviously, and it just adds that little extra bit of security when putting it on your wrist. You don't need to worry about dropping it. So speaking of putting it on your wrist, it's finally time for the grand wrist reveal. So here we are on my 7-inch wrist down to a T. This is actually wears about the upper limit of how I like my watches, but it's actually the perfect size. You see it's not hanging over the edges too much, but it still has a nice little bulky masculine look to it, and I like that a lot. Not that a woman can't wear this. I think this would look excellent on a woman, actually, if she doesn't mind wearing a bigger watch. But I think this is about the perfect size for me, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it works well. I don't really like watches too much bigger than this, but this is about at the sweet spot. So there you have it, guys. The Parnis Yachtmaster in rose gold. There will be a full review up on the blog, chronometercheck.com. Check it out for a little bit more thorough in terms of the specs and stuff like that. And we will have more reviews coming up soon, so make sure to leave a like and subscribe for that. Thanks for watching.